Welcome to Regarded Magical Academy, a school that specializes in teaching young people to become mages. Here at the Academy, students will participate in a number of classes and dungeon expeditions in order to collect academic points and eventually learn all the necessary skills to master magic. This is all with the goal of eventually ascending the tower and becoming a key figure in safeguarding the world, whether it be to become a Machiavander or just a piece of gutter trash who supports them. Everyone in this world is important. However, there is a student who seemingly cannot use magic. Hell, they can't even flow mana through their body. Obviously, an individual like this breaks the fundamental structure of this world, and it's no surprise that it became a subject of ridicule. Whis Serfort, the so-called failure of the magic world. From birth, Will had never been able to use magic for some mysterious reason, but regardless, they still worked hard every day in the academy to prove themselves, earn the respect of their peers, and one day ascend the tower. However, with no ability to use magic, Will would be missing out on a huge amount of academic credits. So to compensate, they'd spend a good chunk of their time inside the dungeon in order to collect credits that way. And thankfully for Will, in exchange for no mana, he was instead gifted with an exceptional body. Will possesses incredible strength and speed, being able to keep up and go toe-to-toe with the dungeon's monsters, sometimes with his bare hands. And with his immense knowledge of monster anatomy, every beast in his way is analyzed and neutralized in a matter of minutes. It doesn't matter what monster it is. With Will's heightened senses, intellect, and strength, they are dispatched as easily as your father left you for a baddie in Miami. This physical ability also applies to his battle with other mages. Will can easily dodge and tank any rapid-fire spells sent his way. Sometimes he can even understand their spells better than they can. However, even with this immense physical advantage, it wasn't enough for him to gain the respect of his fellow mages. No matter how much you tried, your worth in this world is heavily tied to your ability to channel the arcane arts. However, Will was special in that regard as well. You see, it isn't necessarily that Will can't use magic, it's more like his body won't let him. Okay, that kinda doesn't make sense, so stick with me here. Well, a mage can use magic because they store mana in their bodies and then expel mana out of their bodies in the form of spells. Will, however, can't expel mana out of his body. He can, however, absorb it. In fact, his body contains an immense amount of mana, all screaming to be let out. And this leads us to Will's unique ability and his unique nature. For as long as magic has existed in this world, people have attempted to understand it through the manipulation of mana and magical affinities. The elements and attributes that magic controls, from fire to wind to ice to countless other forms of magic, serve as the foundation of how spells are created and used. Every mage's abilities are built around their relationship with mana, their affinity, and their ability to shape the power into something tangible. However, what if there's something beyond those conventional rules? Something that wasn't simply another type of magic, but a completely different way of interacting with it. That power was Whis, also known as a fifth element. Whis is something that fundamentally challenges the way the magic world understands mana. However, Whis is not an element in the same way as fire, ice, or wind. It is not a magical attribute that a mage is born with, or a spell that can simply be learned. Instead, Whis represents an entirely different relationship with magic itself. While normal mages take mana within their bodies and release it outwards through wands and spells, Whis works by taking existing magical power and transforming it into something that can be wielded through a sword. And that's exactly what makes Will such an impossibility. For his entire life, the world believed that Will was someone who had no connection to magic. After all, he couldn't use a wand, couldn't cast spells, and couldn't manipulate mana in the same way every other mage could. To everyone, Will appeared to be someone who was completely powerless in a world where magic determined your worth. But the truth was far more complicated. He was never lacking in magical potential. His body simply interacted with mana in a way that defied everything people understood. While other mages were capable of releasing and controlling magic normally, Will possessed an abnormal compatibility with mana that prevented him from using conventional magic, but allowed him to utilize something completely unique. Through Whis, Will used his sword as a medium to absorb and transform magical power. His blade became a bridge between magic and physical combat, allowing him to take abilities of other mages and recreate them in the form of magic swords. If Will incorporates fire magic, his blade becomes infused with flames. If he incorporates ice magic, his sword gains freezing properties. The type of magic used as a source determines the form and abilities Whis creates. This is what makes Whis such a terrifying ability. Every spell that would normally be a threat becomes another potential addition to his arsenal, allowing Will to adapt his fighting style depending on the magic he has access to. However, Whis is not limited to simply borrowing the abilities of others. As Will continues to understand his power, he develops prime pathos, an evolution of Whis that allows him to recreate magical abilities without requiring another mage to provide the original source. Instead of absorbing magic from someone else, Will can reproduce these abilities through his own memories, emotions, and experiences. Will continues pushing Whis even further with Prime Pathos revived. This advancement allows him to store and access multiple spells more efficiently. He then evolves this even further with Tactical Reload, allowing him to switch different forms of Whis during battle. Instead of being restricted to a single magical attribute, Will can rapidly change his fighting style depending on the situation. Because Whis itself is not tied to one specific element, the possibilities are determined by the magic Will incorporates. Ignis Whis allows him to wield fire-based power, transforming his sword into a weapon capable of producing devastating flames. Albus Whis, created through Alfaria's ice magic, allows him to utilize an ice-based blade and access the power of that attribute. In fact, Will even went as far as to copy Alfaria's cloning technique. But even with all these abilities, Will was still only accessing a fraction of what his body was capable of, because hidden beneath his limitations was an enormous amount of power that his body had been restricting. And when Will finally removes those restrictions, he enters a state known as Courage Limiter Off. Limiter Off is a complete release of Will's suppressed potential, allowing his immense power within his body to flow freely. This amplifies everything that already made Will dangerous. His strength, speed, endurance, and his ability to utilize Whis all reach a completely different level. But why exactly was Will built this way? For what purpose does he possess such power? Long before Will's time, these beings known as the Celestial Host descended upon humanity and brought destruction on a scale that humanity had never seen before. They weren't just powerful monsters or another group of enemies that could be defeated by mastering stronger weapons and magic. The Celestial Host existed beyond the limits of what ordinary mages understood, destroying entire civilizations and forcing humanity and the remainder of other races' greatest warriors to unite against them. Eventually, the first generation Magia Vander, alongside Mage Queen Mercedes and other powerful figures, managed to push them back and capture their leader, Ball, sealing him away at the top of the tower. But there was one major problem. They couldn't actually kill him. No matter how powerful their magic became, or how strong their weapons were, neither the wand nor the sword alone was enough to defeat an existence like Ball. And this is where Whis comes in. The creation of Whis was humanity's attempt to combine the two greatest paths in power in this world, the wand and the sword. Magic alone wasn't enough. Physical strength wasn't enough. They needed a power that could bridge the gap between the two. A weapon that could combine magical ability with the physical force required to fight beings that surpass normal understanding. And the person who inherited that possibility was Will Serfort, which makes the irony of Will's entire life even more insane. The same ability that made him a failure in the eyes of society was actually the reason he was the one person capable of saving it. Everyone looked at Will and saw someone who couldn't use magic, someone who had no place in a world ruled by mages. But the truth was, he was carrying something the entire world needed. Someone who could wield the power of a mage while fighting with the strength of a swordsman. The world thought Will was born without magic, but in reality he was born because the world needed something beyond magic.